Hey guys, this is part 2 where I'm going to be ranking all of the fantasy and historical TV series that I watched in 2024. So, welcome back to part 2 of me ranking all of the historical and fantasy TV series that I watched in 2024. And thank you very much if you happen to watch part 1, and if you have stuck around to watch this second part, thank you very much, because as I mentioned in my previous video, historical fiction and fantasy are a very niche thing. It's either your thing or it's not. So I'm not expecting, massive views on this whatsoever. Just a couple of you, really, so yeah, thank you for taking the time to watch these videos. So let's get going with part 2, and I'm just going to put up the rules again really quickly, how I'm ranking these videos. First up, obviously, the TV series must be historical fiction or fantasy-based. I am including fantasy in this series because oftentimes fantasy has a very historical-like aesthetic to it. Second, the series must be set before the year 2000. Contemporary shows may be included as long as they have one of the following: A, a time travel element; B, flashbacks that are pivotal to the plot; C, dual or multi-narratives that take place prior to the year 2000. Third, this list will include shows that premiered in the year of 2024, but the list may also have shows that are older that this is my first time watching them. And last, this ranking is meant to be fun. It is based off of my personal enjoyment and my level of engagement with each of these series. At number 20, Belgravia, The Next Chapter. Set 25 years after the events of Belgravia, following the marriage of Lord Frederick Trenchard and Clara Dunn, as secrets and scandal threaten their newfound happiness. Starring Benjamin Wainwright, Harriet Slater, Toby Regbo, and Sophie Winkleman. So this is the spin-off, if you will, of Belgravia. And the thing is, I don't think you have to have seen the original Belgravia to watch and enjoy this show, because things are developed and explained in this particular spin-off to the point that you're not going to be lost or confused. You won't have missed anything if you've not seen Belgravia. And if anything, I think I actually liked this spin-off a bit better than the original Belgravia. I liked Belgravia, but I do think it was a bit more slow for me, and I liked this one. It had a bit more of a quicker pace to it. It was much more kind of soap opera-esque, if you will, which I won't really complain about, because it made it a little over the top on occasion, but that was okay. I still like the show. I'm a sucker for period dramas like this, good-looking British people and wonderful sexy clothing from the time period. I love this sort of thing. Like I said, there is a soap opera element kind of quality to the show, which may kind of frustrate you, or it may not, but I still highly enjoyed this show for what it was. And I think this show was tackling a lot more characters too compared to the original Belgravia. I found myself liking and enjoying all the characters in this show kind of a bit more than I did in the previous installment. And what the show kind of boils down to, it's all about rich people drama and rich people problems, that kind of thing. And I'm kind of here for that sort of thing. At number 19, Mary and George. Follows the Countess of Buckingham, who molds her son to seduce King James I and become his all-powerful lover. Starring Julianne Moore, Nicholas Galitzine, and Tony Cran. This show was absolutely wild. Yeah, guys, my God. I should have known that this show was going to be wild just from watching the trailers, because I love the trailers for this show. It just made the show look like so sexy and scandalous, and I obviously know about King James I. He's one of those monarchs. It's like I know about him, but there was still so much that I didn't know that this show was exploring. The show is primarily focusing on Mary and George. Mary Villiers and George Villiers. Mother and son, if you will. And yeah, King James was known for having male lovers. And yeah, George Villiers, the Duke of Buckingham, was one of his lovers, one of his, top lovers, if you will. So yeah, this whole show is about the characters of Mary and George, and yeah, just the Villiers family in general. And they're plotting and scheming to get into the court of King James and really make a name for themselves and really put themselves in a place of high power where their voices will be heard first and foremost. So I love that whole thing, just scandal and drama and intrigue and backstabbing. I love this show. It is just wildly entertaining. Yeah, the performances alone are magnificent. Julianne Moore, for crying out loud. How the hell did they get Julianne Moore for this show? Yeah, I loved Nicholas Galitzine as George Villiers. Just, perfection. And yet Tony freaking Curran is King James, you guys. I've never seen just perfect casting. At number 18, The Law According to Lydia Poet, Season 2. Lydia Poet continues to fight for women's rights and change the law while investigating murders. Starring Matilda de Angelis. I had been hoping and praying that this show would get a season 2, and lo and behold, a season 2 did arrive in 2024, kind of just out of nowhere. You guys, I hadn't heard a damn thing about a season 2, and then it just comes out. Here's a trailer. I was like, oh yay. Lydia Poet is one of those shows that I feel like more people need to be watching, okay? The show is done entirely in Italian, so yeah, you definitely need to watch the subtitles. I just adore this show. It has this wonderful historical backdrop. It's based off of a real woman, Lydia Poet, who was Italy's first female lawyer. And there's just wonderful intrigue and murder mystery, and the show is oddly very comedic in places. I love the unique sense of humor that this show has. It's very much needed. And yeah, if the lady detective genre is your sort of thing, this is going to be your show to watch. I love shows that have lady detectives, and yeah, Lydia Poet, not only is she kind of an amateur detective, but she's also, really trying to become a lawyer as well. Yeah, this show is just so incredibly fun. I love the whole look of it. If you've not been watching it, you need to watch it. Season 2 was remarkable. At number 17, Franklin explores one of the greatest gambles of Benjamin Franklin's career when he outmaneuvers British spies and French informers while engineering the Franco-American alliance of 1778, starring Michael Douglas. I tell you what, Apple TV Plus, whatever that streaming is called, I think it's called Apple TV Plus. Apple TV Plus had just a host of incredible shows this year, just one after the other. I just kind of kept watching show after show after show on Apple TV Plus, when normally I don't watch anything on Apple TV Plus, okay? There might be one show a year that I watch on Apple TV Plus, and yeah, this year I watched a lot. There was a lot of great shows, especially in the historical fiction genre, if you will. And Franklin was one of those shows that I kind of learned about at the last minute. Let me tell you, Apple TV Plus, they do a very poor job of promoting their shows, okay? Because a lot of their shows I do not find out about until the last minute. And yeah, Franklin was definitely one of those shows. And I really highly enjoyed this show. It takes place in France, obviously, but we're following Benjamin Franklin, and yeah, him trying to deal with, British spies and the French monarchy and the French diplomats, all in the service of trying to help out, America, America that is still trying to find its ground, and the American Revolution is going on. Michael Douglas as Benjamin Franklin, I think, was really perfect, terrific casting. It totally worked for me. And it's not only his story, it's not only Franklin's story as an elderly man, but yeah, the story of his grandson, the journey he's going on. And I loved all of the key historical figures, because you do get like Marie Antoinette and Louis the 16th and Lafayette. I loved all the historical figures, the historical backdrop, obviously, and yeah, just such lushness to this show, I think, is the best way to describe it. There's a lushness to this show. It's really vibrant and colorful. You feel like you're in the era. You feel like you're in France. I'm not sure if they actually filmed in France. I'm going to assume they filmed in France, but it felt like France, I love the whole look and design of this show. The acting, the writing were wonderful. And the thing is, there's so many shows that take place during the American Revolutionary War, especially just taking place in America. So I like the fact that this is a show that we're following a character who is American, but he's alone and isolated in France, having to do things by himself. So I liked kind of seeing that side of things. What's going on in France during this time period? At number 16, Marchlands. Set in 1968, 1987, and 2010, following three families across different decades living in the same house, linked by the death of a little girl who drowned in 1968, and the mystery of her death must be solved. Starring Alex Kingston, Jodie Whittaker, Shelley Conn, and Anne Reid. This is actually a miniseries that originally aired in the UK in 2011, if I'm not mistaken, and I just randomly found out about it this year. And I watched it, I loved it, I enjoyed it. I'm upset that I missed out on it, way back in 2011, because I am a sucker for British television. This is the type of show, if you can't tell from the synopsis, there's a lot going on, because you're following three different timelines, three different families, but what links them is that they're all in the same exact house, and they're all united and linked by some sort of connection to this mystery surrounding a little girl who drowned back in the 1960s. So, of course, you're going to have certain characters that are in all three eras, or maybe in just two of them. So it's kind of this thing of how they all do eventually connect. What is the connection exactly? How will the mystery of this little girl who drowned, how will that be solved? Who is to blame? Who is responsible? This was especially just a really kind of gut-wrenching show, because it's focused on the death of a little girl who drowned. It's definitely a show that explores grief and parenting and people, the responsibility they feel, there's a lot of deep and interesting things going on in this mini series. I highly enjoyed it. Just, there's a wonderful intensity to it. It's not the most action-packed of shows, that's kind of just it. It's not the most action-packed of shows, but there's still this thrilling and intensity to it that makes it enjoyable to watch, and kind of as every episode ends, just leaves you hanging that you want to watch the whole thing. At number 15, Lightfields. Set in 1944, 1975, and 2012, following three families across different decades living in the same house, linked by the death of a young teenage girl who died tragically in a fire, who now haunts her home seeking justice for her death. Starring Dakota Blue Richards, Lucy Kahoo, Michael Byrne, and Sam Hazeldine. So if you can't tell, this is like the sequel of sorts to the previous show on this list, Marchlands. The two shows, they do not relate whatsoever. They are both entirely singular. You can watch them without having watched the other. You can watch them in any order you want to. But yeah, they are considered companion pieces together, because they are linked in similar thematic elements, if you will. But yeah, as you can tell, I put this mini-series over Marchlands, because I did enjoy this one a little bit better. And the reason I enjoyed Lightfields a little better than Marchlands is because I think Lightfields had a better conclusion that felt more cohesive and tied up, and how everything linked together made a bit more sense to me, and it flowed better to get to that end point. So I do think there were certain elements that were just better about Lightfields, and why I preferred it a little more. Because Marchlands was dealing with the tragedy of a little girl who drowned. This show is dealing with the tragedy of a young woman who's just a teenager, on the brink of womanhood, who dies tragically in a fire. So there's this sadness and gut-wrenching aspect to it. And again, the show is exploring grief and trauma, people's responsibilities, the blame they put on themselves. Again, deep thematic elements in this show. And I just think Lightfields pulled it off a little bit better than Marchlands. And I just definitely recommend both of these shows if you haven't seen them. Lightfields originally aired back in 2013, so it's another one of those British television shows. I'm upset that I never got around to it until now. At number 14, Outlander Season 7, Part 2. The Frasers return to Scotland to reunite with family, but their homecoming is short-lived due to the continuing war in America, while Roger and Brianna face the crisis of their son being kidnapped, and Roger must travel through the stones to get him back. Starring Sam Heughan and Katrina Balfe. We finally have part 2 to season 7. You guys, about damn time. It's been what, literally like a year in between seasons? At this point, why is it season 7 part 2? Why not just call it season 8? For crying out loud. You know what I mean? Because of the gap being so long, at this point no one remembers the season number. Just label it a whole nother season instead of part 2. Either way, I digress. I really highly enjoyed this second part to season 7. And the fun thing about this season in particular for me is that the front half of the season was plot that I was familiar with because I had read that particular book, but I'm just a little bit far behind with the books. I have not read the next couple books. So the second half of the season was a lot of brand new stuff to me that I wasn't quite sure where it was going. So that was kind of thrilling and exciting that I had no idea where it was going. But yeah, this was an enjoyable second half to this season. I just love this universe, these characters. Diana Gabaldon's world is just so unique and fascinating and full of kind of whimsy and weirdness and yeah, all sorts of conveniences all over the place, but you got to roll with it. And yeah, as always, Sam Heughan and Katrina Balfe, they are this show. They are the heart and core of this show. They are why you watch this show. I love them to bits. Yeah, a very thrilling, exciting, jam-packed season full of twists and turns and just all sorts of craziness. I loved it. At number 13, Bridgerton Season 3. Colin gives Penelope private lessons on how to charm suitors, but things grow complicated as they realize they have feelings for each other. Starring Nicola Conlon and Luke Newton. Now, let me say this. I don't think Season 3 of Bridgerton is the best season. For me, I think Season 2 is the best season, and the Queen Charlotte spin-off series. Those are my personal favorites of the show, okay? Season 3 is not the best, but it's still wildly fun and entertaining, okay? I love the world that has been established in this show because it's just all sorts of kind of wild and crazy, bizarre. It's very vibrant and colorful, you know. I love that about Regency period dramas because sometimes period dramas can be a little angsty and gloomy, and Bridgerton kind of breaks out of that angst and gloom and puts a bit more light and levity and color to it. And yeah, I have been anxiously awaiting Colin and Penelope getting together for 3 seasons now. It did not disappoint. Now, the front half of the season, because Netflix divided it into 2 bits, the front half of the season was a bit kind of slow and monotonous to me because it just felt so repetitive of the previous seasons that had come before. But boy, oh boy, I loved the second half of the season. That's where things finally picked up and we got the ball rolling with the plot and where the characters were going. At number 12, Those About to Die. Set in Rome following the dirty business of entertaining the masses, giving the mob what they want most, blood and sport. Starring Iwan Rheon, Sarah Martins, Tom Hughes, and Anthony Hopkins. This show is like Gladiator if Gladiator was like on crack, okay? If Gladiator was high on something. That's the best way to describe this show. This show is just so wild and insane. Especially the latter half. The latter half just kind of takes off at a whirlwind, breakneck pace that's just totally kind of unexpected, because the front half of the season is a little bit more calm and chill and takes its good sweet time building up the world, building up the characters, building up the plot, and then bam, all of a sudden it just gets wild and crazy and all hell breaks loose. I really was kind of pleasantly surprised with this show because I was a little worried. I was like, I don't know how this is going to go. I'm either going to love it or hate it. And I ended up really highly enjoying this show, which might be an unpopular opinion. I feel like a lot of people didn't particularly like this show, but I had a blast with this show. It's just meant to be fun, you know. I was entertained, you know, to quote Gladiator, are you not entertained? I was certainly entertained. Yeah, Gladiator it is not, obviously, but it still has that action element and the really rich, fascinating characters and yeah, how all the plot threads connect. I had a blast watching this show, and I just loved seeing Iwan Rheon, you guys, Ramsay from Game of Thrones. I just love seeing him have a leading role for a change, where he's a much more kind of complex a character. He's not a hero, but he's not a villain either. I love the middle ground that his character was, because he's like a game master, like he runs a gambling den with all the sports going on. So I loved what his role and function was in the show and where it ultimately kind of went. Yeah, this show was a blast. And at number 11, My Lady Jane, a comedic reimagining of the story of Lady Jane Grey, where she gets to live, thwart a plot to kill her cousin, and fall in love with her betrothed. Starring Emily Bader, Edward Bluemel, Anna Chancellor, and Dominic Cooper. I initially went into this show thinking I was going to absolutely hate it because I saw the first trailer for the show and I was like, oh no, 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 no. Plus, it being based off of a young adult historical fiction book, that was just also a negative bonus right there for me. So there was a lot working against this show initially that I was like, I'm going to hate this show. I'm not going to like it. But I ended up walking out of this show freaking loving it, which I was shocked. I couldn't believe how much I love this show. This is the thing you need to know about this show. Do not go into this show expecting historical accuracy. This show is not about historical accuracy. It's not taking itself seriously. It's here just to have a fun, good time. It's really just drawing inspiration from the story of Lady Jane Grey, who, as a young woman, she was given the crown after King Edward, her cousin, died. And she was given the crown. She was kind of forced into it. And yeah, she's ultimately beheaded eventually by Mary Tudor, who becomes queen. So that's kind of the real historical events there with Lady Jane, that it ultimately ends tragically and very upsetting and disturbingly. So this show, it's not about historical accuracy whatsoever. It's drawing just inspiration from the story of Lady Jane and having just fun with it, like throwing history to the winds and just to hell with it, you know. It's definitely, it's a comedy for sure. It's a satire. I love the unique humor. There's definitely this wonderful, interesting twist, that of a fantasy twist to the show, which I was not expecting because the trailers did not have the fantasy twist in the trailers whatsoever. And yeah, I love the core romance. Oh my god. Lady Jane and Guilford Dudley. Oh my god. I love their romance. I love their chemistry. I was here for it. And yeah, even though the real historical Lady Jane, it ends in tragedy, this show, it's not about the tragedy, you know. It definitely has a much more far different ending, which is really interesting, you know, without kind of going too much into spoilers about it. But yeah, if you were kind of on the fence with this show, I recommend giving it a try and giving it a shot because I think you might be pleasantly surprised with it. Like I said, just go into it. Don't expect historical accuracy whatsoever because that is not the intent of this show. This show does not have the intent to have historical accuracy. Again, it's just kind of very, very incredibly loosely inspired by. So you guys, that is it for part 2 of my ranking of all the historical and fantasy TV series that I watched in 2024. Stay tuned on Friday for part 3. And again, let me know how you feel about the ranking thus far. Are there some disappointments? What are you anticipating might be my top 10? So you guys, that is it for this video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you like this video, you may like these other videos. Bye guys.